Aloha kako, Kalekoa Ka'eo again for Pu'uhonua or Pu'uhuluhulu and Kako Haleakala. And we're here today with a very, very special guest, an old friend from the island of Molokai. And I've asked him to kind of share some of his more recent work and words, which have really helped to clarify and help to explain the particular situation that we have going on here at Pu'uhuluhulu, especially in regards to the Mauna Kea Access Road. And he recently wrote an op-ed piece entitled, "Can the Executive and Legislative Branches of the State of Hawaii specifically legitimize the taking of Department of Hawaiian Home Lands trust lands specifically?" And my friend Halealoha, a longtime advocate for the Hawaiian community, a lot of work especially in regards to repatriation of our iwi kūpuna, and has really led the way in the last couple of decades, maybe 3 decades now, in repatriating thousands of our kūpuna and moipu back to Hawaii. And he is also a 4th generation Hawaiian Homes homesteader from the island of Molokai. In fact, part of the original lessees his family descends from. And I'd like to maybe, first of all, kind of share a little bit about your background and your history. Maybe talking about your work also with the Hawaiian community, and specifically living on the island of on the island of Molokai as a homesteader.
Yeah, lono kako, wao Edward Halealoha Ayau. He kekia Reynolds Lealoha Ayau, kumakua kane. Me kana wahine o mro Maunakea Ka'eo u'u kumakua hine. He kekia Harriet Ahiona Ayau ne kututo wahine. Lawa o Paul kumaho li'i hapai. He kekia Samuel Ka'imina Awau Ka'eo. Lawa o Hilda na ohia kamalu bishaw. Mai ho'olehua Molokai mayau. So I've, for the last, I grew up on Hawaiian Homestead in Ho'olehua, Molokai. My great-grandfather I was named for, his name was the Reverend Edward Haleaniani Ayau. And he was one of the original homesteaders at Kalama'ula. He was part of the Great Experiment, right? When the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act was passed, the Fed said, all right, we're going to do the Great Experiment at Kalama'ula. And if it doesn't work, then they weren't going to proceed to implement the rest of the program. And so my kūpuna kuakahi was one of those selected to be a homestead at Kalama'ula. And they made their lands productive, and they established their homesteads. Then he applied for a agricultural homestead in Ho'olehua, and that's where my father resides today. And that's the homestead that I was raised on. I have my own homestead, but that did not come through my father's side. It actually came through my mother and the man that she married, the u'u o ohana, through Lady Poi Poi U'u, who's actually from Keanai, Maui. And she, I always tell people, I waited the shortest for a homestead. My mom called me in the morning, said, "What you doing?" I said, "Well, I was sleeping till you called." She said, "Well, brush your teeth and get to the office, Hawaiian Homes office. Your grandma wants to give you her lot." And by the time I got there, the paperwork was already typed up, and I just had to sign for it. So I became a 4th generation lessee. My grandmother Harriet Ne lived on the homestead. My father is a lessee now. My aunties, my cousins, we all homesteaders. And so this issue is especially important to me as a beneficiary, and it's especially important that our people hear the truth. We need to yell at people about this, because when you learn the truth, it's going to knock anybody over. When they find out that there's just a history of theft of Hawaiian homelands. And I'm not making that up.
So for you, there's no controversy. This is just plain truth, right?
This is plain truth. So in 1983, there was a federal state task force whose purpose was to investigate the state's handling of the Hawaiian Homes program. So let me back up. Hawaiian Homes program passes in 1920. What's a homestead? A homestead under this program is either a residential lot, an agricultural lot, a pastoral lot. And it's for Hawaiians who can prove that they have 50% blood. And so if people get upset about that, the original legislation, they wanted to the requirement to be 100%. Kuhil, who was a delegate to the U.S. House, but he couldn't vote, right? This was his legislation, but he couldn't vote on it. His recommendation, what he advocated for the blood quantum to be was 1/32. Any amount of Hawaiian blood makes you Hawaiian. And the powers that be said, no, we're going to sell at 50. So it could have been way worse. This program would be only for 100% Hawaiians. So that law is passed in 1920. And then now it's federal law. So it's a very important theme to all about what I'm about to say. Why? Because the U.S. Constitution includes what's called the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause says that whenever there's a federal and a state law on the same issue, the federal law controls. That's what supremacy means. Okay, so keep that in mind. So 1920, this law passes. Soon thereafter, they start recruiting Hawaiians to become the first homesteaders at Kalamaula, one of whom was the Reverend Edward Halealoha Ayau. Why? One, because our family is from Pelekunu, Molokai. So it was from the north side where the water is. Not in Kalamaula where it's hot, dry. But those are the kind of lands that the Congress gave to Hawaiians. What is the worst lands that nobody wanted? Farthest away from water sources that the plantations never already take. That was the roadmap to how Hawaiian Home Lands were. The inventory was compiled. And so they established the Kalamaula program, the Kalaniʻanaole settlement, and they called it the Great Experiment. Because the Fed said if that settlement failed, that they weren't going to proceed to implement the rest of the act. And so everything was hinging on the success of those homesteaders. If they could clear the land, if they could establish their water resources, and water was brackish there. So it was tough. And the ground is not that great for farming. They were still able to produce. And as a result of the success of Kalamaula, Keaukaha was established. All the other, homestead areas were established. And just for the record, so I come from the family that says Molokai, not Kai, which is not to say one is right or wrong. It's to say that's what my kūpuna told me. And so that's what I use. So fast forward, 1959. What happens? The U.S. Congress enacts the Admissions Act for the state of Hawaii. Right? So what is an admission act? It's a contract. It's an agreement between the United States and the Territory of Hawai, which is now about to become the State of Hawaii.
Just before you go on, I just want to make sure people understand, you're also a trained and licensed attorney.
I keep forgetting about that.
Yeah, but it's important to understand that you have a background in legal law and analysis.
I'm a 1989 graduate of the University of Colorado School of Law. I was trained at the Native American Rights Fund to stand for justice, but more importantly, I'm a haumana of Ed and Polani Kanahele, and I learned to stand for Pono.
Yeah.
Shucks, where I was.
1959 Admissions Act, brother.
So you know that song, in 1959, Olahali said, fine, let Hawaii in the USA. So that's what happened. Except in that legislation, they made very important, they placed conditions, on statehood. One of those conditions, a very critical one, is they made the new state of Hawaii responsible for implementation of the Hawaiian Home Lands program. Then the language uses the term faithful management of the Hawaiian Homes. That's very critical to what I'm about to talk about. Okay, so and the federal government in this contract, this compact, this agreement with the territory to become a state says one of the conditions we're placing on you becoming the 50th is your faithful management of the Hawaiian Homes program. Okay, so that was 1959. 1968, the University of Hawaii builds this road over Hawaiian Home Lands. We're on Hawaiian Home Lands.
And just to be specific, this is the Mauna Kea Access Road that we call today, correct?
Yes. So University of Hawaii builds a road over it. Problem is, they don't get authorization from the Hawaiian Homes Commission, from the landowner. So, my understanding is UH writes to the Hawaiian Homes, and the department, no one from the department responds. So UH proceeds to build a road. And their defense is, well, we tried to talk to you and nobody responded, so we built it anyway. That is theft. If you appropriate the property of another without their authorization, that is theft. You can spin this any way you like. It's still theft. That was 1968. What is today? What day is this?
2019.
The University of Hawaii still never paid for that road. No one has. Not even the DOT. Nobody. So
no transaction that would show that there was a receipt and kind of for payment at all.
No.
Yes.
So 1968, the road gets built, right? In the 1980s, DHHL kind of realizes, wow, they built a road over our lands without our permission. Starts writing to them, and then being UH. In the 1990s, well, in the 1980s, the Federal State Task Force investigation and report occurs, right? And they publish a report. Mililani Trask was the secretary of that study. Very thorough but documented review of the state's mismanagement of lands. And that report recommends that the State of Hawaii compensate the Hawaiian Home Lands Trust. I'm not talking about, they don't just take this road. They took a lot of land. So much that the estimated value is just over $1 billion. That's $1 billion of back then.
And how did that come about? And just real quickly, maybe how did they come about with this idea of $1 billion being estimated?
Because they take all the different lands and they assess a value to it. Okay, so that means $1 billion worth of land was taken. And when I say taken, it was appropriated by state agencies, oftentimes facilitated by executive orders by the governor. So what did I say happened in 1959? What was that condition? Faithful management of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So if you take $1 billion worth of land from the Hawaiian Homes Trust, are you being faithful?
And this is the 1980s, just to be clear, right?
This is the 1980s. This is them looking at the situation. It's not until the 90s. It's not until the 90s that the governor at that time creates a task force to look more closely into the value of those lands. It's in the 90s that this assessment, this valuation of $1 billion is made. Okay, the state then begins to negotiate with Hawaiian Homes because there's so many different types of land that was taken. They pass Act 14, right? And when they, being the state legislature, they pass Act 14 and declare themselves that Act 14 is intended to be a global settlement.
Now, what is the process of Act 14? Just got to real quickly. I mean, how did that come about? I mean, who negotiated with who and how?
Well, I'm not that clear on how it came about, except that the governor's task force comes up with these findings that these particular, inventories, which lands were taken. A man named Ed King was appointed to oversee this process. But the point is that they're negotiating now with the Hawaiian Homes Commission to figure out how to address the taking of all these lands. Again, nearly $1 billion in value. Does anyone know what Act 14 settles for in terms of the total amount? $600 million. So when someone tells you, what the hell are you guys complaining? You got paid $600 million. The fallacy in that is you took $1 billion. So that was a $400 million hit to the trust. And so what that tells, so government has the power of condemnation. Yeah, we all understand that. It's the power to tell a private landowner that we can take your land, but we have to pay fair market value for it. We condemn it, we pay you fair market value, and not to say that they could do that to Hawaiian Home Lands, but if that had been followed, the state of Hawaii would have been required to pay $1 billion, because that's the fair market value. Which is to say, and I'm sorry for those of you from the state of Hawaii watching this going, it was economically feasible for the state to steal the land, because Act 14 was their making. They came up with that price. They got Hawaiian Homes Commission to agree to it. Which is to say, for every dollar that they stole from the trust, they paid 60 cents back. So the $600 million has been paid. But the Act 14, if you read it, and hopefully somebody can put the link on so that people can read it for themselves. Don't believe what I'm saying. Read it for yourself. Act 14 itemizes the different types of lands they took. With respect to roads and highways, they were negotiating specifically with the Hawaiian Homes Commission on it, and they placed a price of $5 million, a value of $5 million on those lands. And there was about 367 acres, over 367 acres of lands that were taken for roads and highways, including the 65 acres, for the Mauna Kea Access Road. Okay, so the state offers to Hawaiian Homes Commission $5 million, and they
just
say,
to be clear, so the $5 million is separate from the $600 million that was negotiated. That's what you're arguing. That's what you're saying, sir.
Right. Read Act 14.
Yeah, okay.
It's itemized. So the $5 million was their own separate value for it. So the Hawaiian Homes Commission, right? Oh, sorry. They also say the $5 million is going to be raised by the sale of the Marks Estate. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Marks Estate. It's in one. That was a private estate that was given to the state of Hawaii. And the state was going to sell it, and the proceeds from it was going to satisfy this particular debt. Again, only roads and highways. If that didn't happen, the state was going to initiate a land exchange. So for the 367 acres that were taken for roads and highways, the state was going to negotiate with Hawaiian Homes Commission to exchange 367 acres. This is the key part. They never did this. As of right this moment, none of this was ever done. Okay, so Act 14 was passed into law to settle a theft of Hawaiian Home Lands by state agencies, right? And the state legislature passed that law, and the governor signed it into law. Hence the title, can the executive and legislative branches legitimize the theft of Hawaiian Homes Trust lands? Here's a kicker. They put in language in there that said that you cannot bring claims against the state after this act passes. Problem with that is, what if they don't pay? Oh wait, they didn't pay. Can we go after them? Well, the language of Act 14 says you cannot. It says the only actions you can bring for is enforcement. Okay, so question to the community. Can somebody steal something from you? You catch them. You tell them, this is what you owe me for what you stole. You agree on what they're going to repay you for it. And then they never do it for 24 years.
No, your interpretation
is that
sounds like
following
the
rule of law?
It sounds like the state of Hawaii.
Is that following the rule of law?
That's the state of Hawaii's idea of following the rule of law, which is to follow the only rules of law that they want to follow. But I guess my big question with that, of course, is why did the state ever have the intention, or why didn't the state pay the so-called $5 million? And why not complete the deal?
See, I cannot answer that, because that would presuppose that I understand the mindset of the folks involved. But I can answer this because a deputy attorney general named Randall Young issues an opinion letter, and he's issuing an opinion letter to Kazu Hayashida, who at the time is the director of the Department of Transportation, right? And it's specifically regarding the Mauna Kea Access Road. And apparently Hayashida...
So this is post 1995
yes.
Act. So just be clear. So if it was part of Act 14, this would be something that would have been taken care of.
It was part of Act 14.
Right, but I mean, my point in other words, if it was something that was to be completed, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's something that's coming out after.
This is the implementation of what they had agreed
to get that settlement completed, correct? Yeah.
Okay, wait. Before I get into that, let me just say this: the Hawaiian Homes Commission undertakes action to approve of the offer that the state of Hawaii made for the $5 million or the initiation of the land exchange. But the commission, in its wisdom, reserves the right to maintain its claim for those lands and to take any legal actions necessary should there be non-compliance by the state.
I think that's
the critical
important point.
That's the critical important. Okay, so they take that action. So in effect, signaling to the state of Hawaii that we will approve of this action for the $5 million or the land exchange. Now fast forward to the letter from Deputy Attorney General Randall Young to Kazu Hayashida. He says, this is in response to your inquiry about why Hawaiian Homes is asking you for $5 million. And the essence of the letter basically says, it is our understanding that that was never offered to Hawaiian Homes. So what's critical about him saying that?
Yeah. Basically, you have two different interpretations of what was agreed upon.
Well, I guess this is how contract law works, right? You have an agreement between two parties. When one party makes an offer, the other party accepts, and that they both believe that there's what the law calls a meeting of the minds. Mm-hmm. And now we have an agreement. Mm-hmm. So, the Hawaiian Homes Commission thought that the state of Hawaii is offering them $5 million for the roads and highways. And they passed that motion based on that understanding. And now this AG opinion letter says that was never the case. Hence, no meeting of the minds, no contract, no agreement, no transfer of the Mauna Kea Access Road.
That's a very elemental piece of contract law.
101, first year. I mean, that's what you're required to take in first year. So that road never transfers. So for the department now to, again, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the department, but as a lessee, to look at this situation and say, but no one's talking to us, the beneficiaries, about what we think about the road, because this is what Halealoha Ayau, as a fourth generation lessee, thinks about this situation.
Let me ask you, so post 1995,
yes,
did the Hawaiian Homes Commission or the chairman continue to verbalize that this road still belonged to Hawaiian Homes?
I'm not sure what actions were taken between when Act 14 was passed until now. I know that as the department was looking into it,
right?
But I think in the hearing with Senator Kahele,
correct,
the chairman makes clear that the land is still Hawaiian Homes.
Right. Yeah. So
in order for that to be the case, that means
never transferred, right?
It never transferred. So the problem with the statement by the Attorney General's office that DOT has jurisdiction is they can't possibly have it. There's been no transaction.
And just to repeat, so officially, the head of Hawaiian Homes has been on record that the land in question that's under the so-called Mauna Kea Access Road is still being claimed by the
still owned.
Okay, yeah, so that's a very important point. So it's not that Hawaiian Homes themselves has come to the conclusion that that land was ever.
That's my understanding from watching the hearing. That's my understanding from watching the hearing.
That's very important.
So this is a question. So when the AGs released that statement on Friday, I think, and said that DOT has jurisdiction of the road, my interpretation of that means, so they have the authority to fix potholes, but they don't have authority as an owner, because they can't be. Hawaiian Homes is a trust. There are federal requirements to exchange Hawaiian Home Lands, and in my article I identify them. Mm-hmm. And yes, some of them were just recently passed by the feds, but nonetheless, because the transfer didn't occur, those are all the conditions that a land exchange is subject to. One of which is consultation with beneficiaries. That hasn't happened, and as a beneficiary, I urge our commission to please, if we're supposed to be representing the interests of the community, of our beneficiaries, how can we do that? We don't know what they think about it. That's basic.
And the protection of the trust itself, in regards to the fiduciary responsibilities to keep the trust.
So those are federal trust principles. So the first one federal trust principle is the responsibility to protect your assets, your inventory. So the question becomes, does Hawaiian Homes have a duty to protect this road from being taken? Right. Second trust duty is exclusive loyalty to beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So exclusive loyalty means you can only consider the interests of your beneficiaries, nobody else. Not the state of Hawaii.
So that should be at the forefront, and not the interest of the University of Hawaii, or the interest of the TMT, or the interest of the governor's office.
The interest of science, the interest of anybody's interest. Excuse me. You have the duty of exclusive loyalty. So how can we be loyal to beneficiaries if we haven't asked them what they think about? And we're not asking them about TMT. So let me be real clear about one thing. TMT is a non-Hawaiian Homes issue.
Correct.
That's not Hawaiian Home Lands up there. We have no connections through the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act to TMT. This opinion from a lessee is about that road only. That's the Hawaiian Homes issue. I'm taking a risk by obviously saying these things, but the truth is so powerful here. So one of the questions I posed in the article is, was it appropriate for the state of Hawaii to arrest kūpuna on this stolen road, some of whom are beneficiaries, instead of going after them for paying for the road they stole? I mean, I don't think we're sounding unreasonable. Something got stolen. Shouldn't that get resolved first, and we not be so trigger happy to arrest our people standing on stolen Hawaiian Home Lands?
Let me ask you, what's the duty of the commission, in your mind, to protect the rights of the beneficiaries with this particular question?
The first duty is to consult the beneficiaries. And it's not like beneficiaries haven't come to the commission and stated their concerns. And in all fairness, beneficiaries have come to the commission and also said that they supported TMT. Again, the problem is
Nothing to do with
nothing to do with TMT. But the point is that we gotta have that discussion. There has to be the opportunity for beneficiaries to express themselves in order for the commission to be able to uphold its trust responsibilities. So, Act 14, back to Act 14. So, to me, again, in my capacity as a lessee, the Hawaiian Homes Commission is not supposed to be upholding Act 14. It's supposed to be challenging Act 14. Because Act 14 is inconsistent with its federal trust duties. I mean, the trust got jacked. And instead of going after them to complete all of the redress that's supposed to occur, instead we're marred in this issue of TMT.
Let me ask you also too, with the idea that if the Act 14 did occur, if there's argument that, in regards to, there was some kind of legal taking of what's called the Mauna Kea Access Road today, in which the state of Hawaii through the DOT controls or owns the road. There's also this idea that I understand is that the feds or the DOI would have to confirm any legal transfers.
Yeah, well, I started to get into that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digressed.
Yeah.
So part of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act are federal regulations that govern the exchange of Hawaiian Home Lands. And so in the article, we list all what those requirements are. None of them of which were complied with. And in order for the land to have transferred, all of them have to be complied with. And if you read every single requirement, the answer is no to every single one. There is no land that the state offered to in exchange for. That was never declared. Hawaiian Homes never did an assessment of whether or not this is in the best interest of beneficiaries too. We never consulted them. There's been no assessment of value. I mean, you just go down the whole list. But the most important part is, it requires the Secretary of Interior to approve.
And that never occurred, correct?
Well, nothing's occurred.
Yeah, just to confirm.
So again, why this threat of arrest on stolen Hawaiian Home Lands rather than going after the people who haven't paid for the theft of this road? What? But so if you're at home right now watching this, and you don't give a, you don't care about what's happening to Hawaiians, and it's not within your interest to care about what's happening in Mauna Kea. You just want to be American citizen in the state of Hawaii. This is why you need to be concerned. Remember the condition of statehood, a faithful management of Hawaiian Home Lands by the state of Hawaii. So can you relentlessly steal lands from DHHL, from the Hawaiian Homes Commission, right? This occurred just 9 years after the Admissions Act was passed. So it took the state of Hawaii 9 years to become unfaithful to the Hawaiian Homes program. The current process now is the governor appoints the Hawaiian Homes chairman and all commissioners, right? Is there an inherent conflict in that? Because there's the interest of the state of Hawaii, legitimate interest of the state of Hawaii. There's the legitimate interests of the Hawaiian Homes Commission and the beneficiaries. Sometimes those two aren't the same. So who is the commission supposed to be loyal to? I'll give you an example if you think I'm just making this up. Cully Watson was chairman of Hawaiian Homes. When he was chairman of Hawaiian Homes, he did what every chairman is expected to do. And he made decisions that were in the best interest of the trust and not the state of Hawaii. What did Governor Ben Cayetano do after his first term? Does anyone know? Removed him. Removed him as chairman. Okay? Removed him for being a responsible chairman that he's supposed to be. That's to highlight to you the conflict of interest. Okay? Here's the other conflict. Equally important. The Hawaiian Homes Commission is represented by the Department of the Attorney General. So the Department of the Attorney General represents the state of Hawaii, represents the Land Use Commission, the Water Commission, the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Are you getting independent legal representation when the lawyers, which is not to say, this is not an attack on the integrity of those individuals whom I know and respect, but that is a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. The second Nelson case highlights that. What did Hawaiian Homes do? What did our chairman have the guts to do? Hire independent representation. We had to be independent from the state in order to promote the interests of the trust and the beneficiaries. So another conflict of interest. So this relentless thievery of land, this appointment of the commissioners by the governor, this representation by the Department of the Attorney General, while supposedly representing the interests of the trust. At what point have you invalidated the condition for the faithful management of the Hawaiian Homes program? It's a serious question. And if you're not interested in what's happening to Hawaiians, you need to make sure the state of Hawaii doesn't violate the trust anymore, because it could invalidate statehood.
I know another issue we had been talking about earlier is the question of, especially what you see happening here at the Pu'uhonua, Pu'uhuluhulu, and questions of, and you've done several talks here, and also, as students ourselves and the Pua folks, and the question of Kapu Aloha, and your kind of understanding as someone who I've worked with for many, many years, through Kapu Aloha and stuff. Maybe as many have asked, you can give your kind of perspective on those ideas also. Be very, very important.
And what I'm about to say is what it means to me. Yeah, not what it should mean to others, but just to me. To me, it's nothing new, because it's what we were trained to do in our work to malama iwi kūpuna. We just never gave it a name. Giving it this name, Kapu Aloha, made sense to me, because I was like, Because in order for us to have been successful advocates, especially on an international stage, where we're going to countries like Germany, England, Australia, Canada, Switzerland, Scotland, there's no international authority to repatriate our ancestors. But we've done 13 international repatriation cases, 119 total repatriation cases, the majority of that under U.S. federal law, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. But how is it that we're able to get the Germans in Dresden in 2017
we got them,
to give us back our kūpuna? Kapu Aloha, that's all, of relentlessly standing
And
up.
just so, how many years did that one take? I mean, that over a couple of decades.
26 years.
26 years of asking.
26 years. 26 years to get the Germans to give back our kūpuna, and they finally did. I would sit across the table from these people that I just want to choke their necks when they're telling us, when they're referring to our kūpuna as their property. They're referring to somebody's grandma as their property. And it takes, so what does Kapu Aloha require in me? It required me to have a level of intellect to understand its importance. It required me to have a level of understanding of its role in this ability to project power through humility. Project power through humility. Let me give you an example. In the 90s, something was going on at the University of Hawaii, and we were asked to do a reburial. But there was hakaka going on internally. And the night that we came to do the reburial, the people that's supposed to be there to grant us permission to come in were late. And this is at night, and we're standing there. We have all the kūpuna all in their pu'olo, ready to rebury, and our hosts aren't there. So we're standing there in the dark. And then one police car after another starts showing up. They thought some kind of protest was going on because everybody was wearing kiheis and malos. And boom, they surrounded us. And so I was leading that ceremony, so I put a kapu of silence on everyone. This is how you project power through humility. As that officer was yelling at us and telling us what, asking us why we're here and all this, we said nothing. We just stood there, said nothing. After 15, 20 minutes of not getting even a reaction, we wasn't even looking him in the face. We just stood there in the dark, standing next to our kūpuna to protect them. And then finally, one of the guys who's supposed to be there gets there, and he doesn't know what's going on. And the cops go, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm so-and-so from the university." "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh, we're doing a reburial." They go, "What?" "Oh," and the guy comes back and he tries to apologize now. Still don't say a word. We stood there in silence and projected power through our humility. Nobody got hurt, nothing, but we just stood our ground. And we stood kia'i over these iwi kūpuna, just like the kia'i standing here doing the exact same thing. So that's an example of Kapu Aloha in action. But we didn't call it that.
I remember back at my first training with Hui Malama back in 90, maybe 91, and we were placed at Malaika. We were placed on Kapu Aloha, and for our purposes back then, it had to do with how many of us.
Maybe I wasn't listening. Maybe I never liked listening.
But I think it had to do with many of us who had come from different backgrounds, different organizations, perhaps.
Different political.
Yeah, so that the idea that we would focus upon the task at hand and we would not bring any, negative kind of energy or negative kind of discussions into the task.
Yes.
So the focus was on a task to treat each other really in a respectful and with humility. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Because we was beefing with all at the time.
Right, yeah, so there's a lot of, negativity that was going on and the focus was to remember to focus upon the task at hand.
Right, so Uncle Ed's phrase back then was, keep your eye on the prize. Mm-hmm. Keep your eye on the prize. And so one time, give an example of how you can get unfocused from your mission because you're angry. So I was in a meeting with Oha and I was chewing them out. Just chewing them out. And Uncle Charlie Maxwell leaned over and whispered in my ear. I don't mind sharing this because this is hilarious. He says, "I'm wearing a pink malo." So if you know Uncle Charlie Maxwell, he's a big man. So the imagery of Uncle Charlie Maxwell in a pink malo, I just lost it. I just started to laugh, And so I just kind of stopped him because he kind of threw me off. So he's like, "Hey, let's take a break." So I asked him, "Uncle Charlie, why did you say that to me?" And he said, "Boy, you was holding on too tight. I had to bring you down because this is not helping at all. Yes, you have a right to be angry, but you have a responsibility to be focused." Mm-hmm. Whoa. I'm not saying these things because I'm a smart person. I'm saying these things because I had great teachers. great teachers who cared about us to teach us, you know, about keeping your eye on the prize, knowing when the time comes to be like a niui. So this ain't you know, light stuff. This is heavy stuff. Lessons to guide your decision making. But the bottom line has got to be responsible.
So with your ideas of Kapu Aloha and what's going on now, considering of course the questions of the Access Road and past history of Act 14, what would you suggest to the commissioners perhaps, or beneficiaries, in regards to how we move forward perhaps in dealing with this particular issue? What would you suggest?
Respectful discourse. Because the problem is so immense that we owe it to each other to be respectful about our particular views. Because that's the only way. The truth is so powerful. The truth, Mahelani Kamau told me one day, just focus on the truth. It will set you free. And I never forgot that. But it has to be respectful. Because human nature is, if you're going to hana somebody with your leo, they're going to tune out. That's just human nature. And that's not effective advocacy, and it's not focused. So that's why I chose to write about it, and chose to sit here to try and educate our people about it, but to also hold the state of Hawaii accountable. So good lawyering is, you don't have to tell them the whole truth, you just got to tell them part of it. And I get that. So I'm here to tell you the rest of it. And the truth speaks for itself. Yeah. The road is stolen.
Good. And any last words you want to throw in there, brother Halealoha, with all your work these past years in regards to where we should head?
I do. Two things, and some of you sitting here might not like it. Number one, although we're on separate sides with the governor of the state of Hawaii, let us not forget that as a senator, David Ige supported Hawaiian immersion language programs and was a big push, a big factor in getting those programs passed. One. So we may be at odds, you know, in this particular issue, but let's not forget what that man did for Hawaiians. Number two, I will go on record to say that I am going to testify in the legislature come this spring, in my capacity as a lessee, to support the confirmation of William Aila as chairman of Hawaiian Homes. Because I absolutely believe that we may be at odds in this situation, but that ultimately he will make responsible decisions for us as a trust to move forward. And I say that because I've done work with him for, 2 decades now in the care of our iwi kūpuna, and I place my trust and faith in that common bond, that foundation that we have. And yes, we may disagree, but it is a respectful disagreement, and one that I will summon every inch of my mana to help address, so that resolution of this road is made, no one is hurt when they come to arrest, and that we hold the state of Hawaii accountable for their mismanagement of Hawaiian Home Lands, and to end the thievery, and if they don't, then to push the feds for hearings on whether or not they violated the Admissions Act. Mahalo.
Hallelujah. I want to thank our brother Edward Halealoha Ayau, again, 4th generation Lessee, Hawaiian homestead, Molokai, born and raised and bred, and a real good friend of mine, worked many years with Halealoha on many issues, and I said, we don't always agree on many things, that's for sure, but we always have a deep respect for the work that we do, at the same time because of our love for our lahu and the love for our people. So with that, again, mahalo, puhonua or puhuluhulu, and of course kako halea cloud there. Keep on tuning in, and let's educate, and let's do what we need to do. Aloha. Aloha ino o iʻio. Aloha.
Aloha.